For a woman who spent 36 years almost never out of the public eye, the news of Hayden Panettiere's death arrived the way so much of her life had, quickly, publicly, and with far more questions than answers. Her representative confirmed to ABC News that the actress had died at 36, and her father, Skip Panettiere, released a short statement calling her an incredible light and a force of nature who brought immeasurable love and joy to everyone who knew her, both personally and through the millions who watched her on screen. He asked, gently but firmly, for privacy while the family processed what he described as a tragic and unimaginable loss. Behind that brief statement sits one of the more complicated inheritances Hollywood has seen in years, a fortune estimated anywhere from $6 million to $15 million depending on which financial outlet you trust, an 11-year-old daughter growing up in Europe with a father she loves but a mother she's now lost, and a family that had already buried one child 3 years earlier. So what exactly does Hayden Panettiere leave behind? Let's get into it. The details that have emerged so far paint a picture that is sad, sudden, and still not fully resolved. According to the Greenville County Coroner's Office in South Carolina, first responders and EMS were called to a residence on Sunday, August 16th, and found Panettiere unresponsive and in cardiac arrest. Paramedics attempted advanced cardiac life support, but resuscitation efforts failed, and she was pronounced dead early that afternoon. An autopsy was completed the following day, and officials said no signs of trauma were found that would have contributed to her death, but the official cause and manner of death remain pending further testing. Greenville police have said the preliminary investigation turned up no indication of foul play or suspicious circumstances. Still, some outlets, citing dispatch audio, reported that the original 911 call referenced a possible overdose, and that Narcan was reportedly found at the apartment complex where Panettiere had been temporarily staying. None of that has been confirmed as an official cause of death by the coroner's office, and it's worth being careful here. An emergency dispatcher's shorthand description of a scene is not the same thing as a toxicology report. Investigators have said final determinations are still pending. What we do know is that Panettiere had reportedly traveled from Los Angeles to the South with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, actor Brian Hickerson, in the days before her death. We'll come back to Hickerson, because their relationship is a significant, difficult part of her story. For now, the timeline that's been reported places her in Greenville that weekend, found by a friend inside the residence, with local authorities and the coroner's office now working to determine exactly what happened. The timing has hit fans especially hard because of how the last several months had gone. Panettiere had spent the spring doing a genuine press tour, podcasts, daytime television, long-form interviews, to promote her memoir, and by most accounts she sounded steadier and more self-possessed than she had in years. That contrast, a woman who seemed to be finding solid ground dying so suddenly just weeks after her book hit shelves, is a large part of why this story has moved through entertainment media as fast as it has. Hayden Leslie Panettiere was born on August 21, 1989, in Palisades, New York, to Leslie Vogel, a former soap actress who went on to manage her daughter's early career, and Alan "Skip" Panettiere, a New York City firefighter. She was in front of a camera before she was a year old, appearing in her first commercial at 11 months. By age 4 she'd landed a recurring role on the ABC soap opera One Life to Live, and a couple of years after that she moved to Guiding Light, where her character's storyline battling leukemia earned her a special honor from the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, a small, mostly forgotten chapter that shaped how the earliest audiences connected with her. Her filmography from there reads like a tour through late 90s and early 2000s family entertainment. She voiced Princess in Pixar's A Bug's Life, played Cheryl Yost opposite Denzel Washington in Remember the Titans, and spent her early teenage years bouncing between films like Ice Princess and Raising Helen. None of it fully prepared audiences for 2006, when a 15-year-old cheerleader who could heal from any wound turned her into a household name almost overnight. That role, of course, was Claire Bennett on NBC's Heroes, a part that kept her on primetime television for 4 seasons and turned "Save the Cheerleader, Save the World" into a genuine pop culture catchphrase. When the show wrapped in 2010, she landed the role that many now consider her signature performance. Juliette Barnes, the ruthless, talented country star on the musical drama Nashville, which ran for 6 seasons and earned Panettiere 2 Golden Globe nominations. According to figures reported by outlets including Celebrity Net Worth and Hollywood Life, she was paid roughly $75,000 per episode on Nashville, and across the show's 124-episode run that would work out to somewhere near $9.3 million in gross salary from that role alone, though it's worth noting that's a back-of-envelope calculation based on a flat per-episode rate, not a confirmed lifetime total. She later played Kirby Reed in Scream 4, and returned to the role more than a decade later in Scream 6, narrated audiobooks, voiced Kyrie across the Kingdom Hearts video game franchise, a role that introduced her to an entirely different generation of fans who'd never seen a single episode of Heroes, and lent her voice to Kate in Alpha and Omega. Her more recent screen work included the 2024 thriller Amber Alert, 2025's A Breed Apart, and finally the psychological thriller Sleepwalker, released in January of 2026 and now, unexpectedly, her last completed film role. Taken together, it's a career that stretched across more than 3 decades and touched nearly every corner of the industry. Daytime soaps, network primetime, horror franchises, animated games, and eventually a memoir that reframed how audiences understood all of it. Panettiere's most consequential relationship began in 2009 with Ukrainian heavyweight boxing champion Vladimir Klitschko, whom she met at a launch event for a photography book they'd both appeared in. The two broke up and reconciled more than once before getting engaged in October 2013. In December 2014, she gave birth to their daughter, Kaya Evdokia Klitschko, in Hawaii. The relationship eventually ended, and in 2018 Panettiere made what she later called an incredibly difficult decision, relinquishing primary custody of Kaya to Klitschko while she sought treatment for alcoholism, substance abuse, and severe postpartum depression. Kaya has spent most of her life living with her father in Europe rather than in the United States, though Panettiere stayed close through visits and long video calls. In interviews, she described those calls as going far beyond small talk into what she called really deep conversations, and said she believed her daughter never felt abandoned because both of her parents made sure she felt supported. Speaking openly about postpartum depression carried real professional consequences at the time. Neutrogena, for whom she'd been a long-time spokesperson, dropped her not long after she discussed the condition publicly, a decision that, looking back from where celebrity culture is now on mental health, feels strikingly out of step with the times. Following her death, Klitschko posted his own tribute, describing Panettiere as an important part of his life and the mother of their daughter, even though the two were no longer partners, and writing that she left this world far too soon. Not long after her split from Klitschko, Panettiere began dating actor Brian Hickerson, and what followed was a documented, difficult pattern that stretched across roughly 2 years of legal proceedings. Hickerson was first arrested in May 2019 on a felony domestic violence allegation. That case was later dismissed after the couple reportedly reconciled. He was arrested again in February 2020, accused of punching Panettiere in the face on Valentine's Day, and pleaded not guilty to domestic battery charges that April. By that July, he was facing 8 separate charges connected to their relationship, including multiple felony counts. Panettiere addressed the situation publicly that same month, writing that she was coming forward with the truth in the hope that sharing her story would help others in abusive relationships find the courage to get help, and that she was prepared to see the process through to make sure it didn't happen to anyone else. Hickerson ultimately pleaded no contest to 2 felony counts in 2021 and received jail time, probation, mandatory domestic violence classes, and a 5-year protective order barring contact with her. The two later reconciled anyway, and by the accounts that have emerged since her death, they were together again in the days leading up to it, the same trip to South Carolina that ended in her death. It's a hard part of her story to sit with, and it doesn't come with a tidy resolution. What's clear is that Panettiere chose, at real personal cost, to speak about the abuse publicly at a time when that kind of disclosure from a working actress was still relatively rare. Loss compounded these struggles in ways that few outside her family fully understood. In February 2023, her younger brother Jansen Panettiere, also an actor, known for roles in The Walking Dead and The Perfect Game, died suddenly at 28 from complications tied to an undiagnosed enlarged heart and aortic valve issues. Panettiere later told People magazine that losing her only sibling felt like losing half of her soul, and that she didn't expect to ever fully get over it, no matter how many years passed. She's also spoken about the physical toll grief took on her body in the aftermath, rapid weight gain, and a resurgence of agoraphobia that kept her from wanting to leave the house, partly because of paparazzi photographing her at Janssen's funeral. By her own account, Panettiere had already been in recovery from years of secret addiction to opioids and alcohol, a struggle she said began at 15 when someone on her team gave her what she called happy pills to help her seem energetic during press interviews. She entered an 8-month rehab stint in 2020 and has spoken candidly about how brutal withdrawal was on her body and mind. All of it became the foundation of her memoir, This Is Me, A Reckoning, released through Grand Central Publishing in May 2026. Her publisher described it as an unusually intimate account covering postpartum depression, addiction and recovery, trauma, domestic abuse, and her brother's death without much softening. Around the book's release, Panettiere also said publicly for the first time that she is bisexual, telling an interviewer she'd dated women since she was young but had kept it private out of fear of how her management and the public would react. Fans lined up outside a Manhattan bookstore for her signing that month, and by most reports the line stretched out the door, less for nostalgia's sake and more because people wanted to hear someone famous describe struggles they recognized in their own lives. The response from her professional community since her death has been immediate and widespread. Viola Davis, who starred alongside Panettiere in the 2016 film Custody, posted an emotional tribute on Instagram praising her talent and describing watching what she called a phoenix rising from the ashes, adding that Panettiere's hardships had become her testimony. Nashville co-star Charles Esten wrote about what a gift it was to work and sing alongside her, while castmate Connie Britton and several other Nashville alumni shared their own messages of shock and grief. On Heroes, former co-stars including David Anders, Dania Ramirez, and James Kyson each posted tributes describing her warmth off-camera and her long-running commitment to animal rights causes. Scream franchise co-stars Melissa Barrera and David Arquette also shared brief messages, and writer-director Brian Fuller, who wrote some of Heroes' best-known episodes, echoed the show's signature line in his own tribute. Beyond Hollywood, U.S. Representative for Washington, D.C., Paul Strauss shared a personal photo and praised her advocacy work, particularly her efforts around whale conservation. That advocacy is a part of Panettiere's story that rarely makes it into standard career retrospectives but says a lot about who she was outside of acting. As a teenager, she became the public face of a campaign against Japan's dolphin hunting practices, joining activists from Sea Shepherd and Taiji and later appearing in The Cove, the documentary about the hunt that went on to win the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. She also became a vegetarian, delivered protest letters to government officials over commercial whaling, and joined the celebrity board of Ronald McDonald House Charities. So, what does Hayden Panettiere actually leave behind financially? The honest answer is that nobody agrees. Celebrity net worth, one of the more frequently cited sources on this kind of figure, put her net worth at roughly $6 million at the time of her death. Other outlets, drawing on earlier estimates from earlier in 2026, have placed the number as high as 12 to 15 million. That gap says as much about how unreliable celebrity wealth estimates generally are as it does about her specific finances. These figures are compiled from public records and industry comparisons, not verified tax filings, and they shift constantly. What's better documented is where the bulk of her income reportedly came from. Her Nashville salary, at an estimated $75,000 per episode across 124 episodes, likely accounts for the largest single chunk of her career earnings. Her 4 seasons on Heroes reportedly added a couple million more, and Scream 4 brought in roughly $1 million, according to figures cited by Celebrity Net Worth and reported by Hollywood Life and Yardbarker. None of that includes her voice acting work, her music, or years spent as the face of brands including Neutrogena, Candies, Kohl's, and Dooney and Burke. Real estate adds another layer. She and her mother bought a Hollywood Hills home in 2008 for roughly $2.6 million and sold it in 2014 for just over $3 million. She later sold a Nashville property in October 2018 for $1.65 million. Around the same period, by several accounts, that her personal life was unraveling behind the scenes. According to one entertainment attorney quoted anonymously by a gossip outlet after her death, Panettiere had reportedly grown frustrated in her final months that acting opportunities had become less frequent even as her memoir topped bestseller lists, a reminder that even decades of visible success doesn't guarantee ongoing financial security in the entertainment industry. What isn't publicly known is whether Panettiere left a will or a trust, or how her estate will ultimately be divided. Reporting since her death has noted that no such arrangements have been identified publicly, which means questions about what her daughter Kaya may eventually inherit remain genuinely unanswered. In her memoir, Panettiere reportedly described Kaya as the greatest gift she'd ever been given, which makes the uncertainty around her financial legacy feel almost secondary next to what she's actually leaving her daughter to carry. It's difficult to sum up what Hayden Panettiere leaves behind in a single sentence, because so much of her story resists that kind of tidy packaging. There's an estate worth somewhere between $6 and $15 million, depending on who's counting. There's a body of work spanning more than 3 decades, from soap operas to superhero television to country music drama to horror franchises. There's an 11-year-old daughter who will now grow up knowing her mother's story not through secondhand headlines but through the words Panettiere chose to put in her own memoir, published just months before her death. And there's a family, her mother, Leslie Vogel, and her father, Skip Panettiere, that has now had to bury 2 children within the space of 3 years. Whatever the investigation in Greenville ultimately determines about the cause of her death, one part of Panettiere's legacy is already permanent. It's sitting on bookstore shelves right now, in her own words, describing exactly what fame, addiction, motherhood, grief, and recovery actually cost her. For a woman who spent her entire life being watched, it might be the one thing she left behind that was fully, deliberately, on her own terms. With that, we've reached the end of this video. If you found it worthwhile, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing for more.